Welcome back to Power Play. If an election were held today, Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives would likely form a majority government. That's according to new polling done for CTV today from Nanos Research. The Conservatives, sitting at almost 38% support nationally, they're up, according to this poll, more than 5 points over the last 4 weeks. The Liberals down 5 points over the same period. So where are the Tories gaining ground, and what does it mean for the government here in Ottawa? Let's bring back the front bench to talk about that. Elliott Hughes, Denise Sayle, Anne McGrath, and Marika Walsh. Marika, I'll start with you. We were just talking in the break about how Nanos polling previously in the summer had actually been a bit of an outlier, that other polls had the Conservatives far out ahead of the Liberals, and now he's definitely in that space for sure. And what's really fascinating is that the increase to the Conservatives appears to have come directly at the expense of the Liberals because it's completely proportional.
Yeah, there's now a double-digit gap between the Conservatives and the Liberals, and that is incredibly significant. It's maybe a relief to the Liberals that they did pull an election early, because otherwise right now we would be in election if they had followed the timeline from 2019 to 2023. So maybe that's, one one sort of check mark for them. But I think that it speaks directly, those numbers speak directly to why we are seeing the Liberals talking again about affordability, trying to put that more in the window, because they know that is why they have fallen behind the Conservatives, and they are trying to catch up to them on that. But certainly, it shows the steep hill they have to climb, and it shows, I think, why the Conservatives are so much more emboldened in the House of Commons.
Majority territory, Anne, is interesting to me out of this poll, because it means that what the Conservatives have failed to do in the last two elections could be within reach. And to do that, they have to pick up seats in places they have been unable to in those elections. And it looks like they will come primarily from the vote-rich GTA, if in fact there were to be an election tomorrow, which is obviously not happening, and Atlantic Canada. What does that tell you?
Well, I think also they're going to have a tough time, because I heard Nick Nanos say it earlier. It's like, the good news is if an election was held today, but the bad news is there is no election today, right? So there is no election today, and as we move forward, they're going to have to keep that coalition of voters together, and it's a tough coalition to keep together, because they're feeding off the People's Party of Canada and kind of blue Liberals, I would say. So it's going to be hard to keep that together going forward. And we just had an election in Manitoba where we saw the way that the Conservatives campaigned, very similar kind of style to what we see from the federal Conservatives. So it'll be interesting to see if it actually works. I think that the other thing that I thought was interesting about that poll is that I looked at the seat breakdown and everything, and it's all based on the current boundaries, and those boundaries are changing in the new year.
That's true. So a few cautionary notes there. Denise, they had picked up a lot of steam, the Conservatives, over the summer. And I think what's interesting about this is it measures kind of the first month of the fall, so September, when people are usually paying a lot more attention to politics than they are during the joyous time of the summer. What does this say to you, and in particular, again, on the regional breakdown, that the message that they're delivering seems to resonate in Atlantic Canada where it hadn't, or the GTA where it hadn't before?
Well, certainly the thing is, look, let's take the polls where they are, but what I would really say is I would look at it in three quotients. One, the polling numbers are one thing. Are the Conservatives happy about the polling numbers? Absolutely. Is there a little bit of excitement and maybe glee? Probably in the back rooms. The second part is around the fundraising. Are they raising enough money if an election were to be held? Would they be ready? But the key thing is, it is not until a writ is dropped, and again, we're not talking about the regional breakdown. We don't know how candidates are being set up, as Anne mentioned, the boundaries. So all of the parties are in this sort of space saying, in this moment in time, the polls will give us an indication. What I can say, though, with almost just this side of certainty, there are a lot of staffers in every single party right now looking at the numbers, crunching to understand what this means. And certainly for the governing Liberals, it feels like as though now is absolutely not a time to call an election.
I'm pretty sure we could all bet money on that right now. Elliott is in agreement. The timing is very interesting, because I often say to people, I feel like we're doing a show and an election is about to be called. That's like the environment it feels like right now, and certainly with the momentum that the Conservatives saw over the summer, like it feels as though something is about to happen, but it's really not. Like for all, we don't know for sure, but likely it's not. What are the implications of that for both the Liberals and the Conservatives?
Yeah, I think, misery loves company. I think the Liberals have had a very tough run, and this poll is just another one of those. To your point, no election on the horizon. I would be very surprised if the government decides to go in 24 either, just because where the economy is likely going, it's going to be difficult for them to take advantage of that. And so you're looking at 25. So for both sides, I think there are risks. For the government, there's a risk of staying in a situation like this when the polls are very bad and it hardens and it becomes even harder and more difficult to unlock. While I don't think there's an election anytime soon, there could be an argument to say, well, things are pretty tough. Let's try and go now because who knows, this might harden. I think that would be extremely risky and unlikely. I'm just playing that the other side. For the Conservatives, it's how do they hold on to this for the next 24 months, 20 months. That's a challenge. Anything can happen. The world economy can change, and there can be a rebound that the government could be swept up in, and it could turn their fortunes. It's risky for all sides, but it's very clear that these numbers are very, very tough for the government. I think they've got some very, very a lot of work ahead of them that they need to do, and there is no really way to get out of it other than focusing in on issues like affordability, issues like cost of living, issues like housing that resonate. Come up with some policies over the next couple of months and do your best to convince Canadians that you have the best plan for the future. It's
interesting because we were all talking about the Manitoba campaign and some of the implications more widely. A lot of how the Premier-designate speaks about his focus during his campaign. He says he was laser-like focused on healthcare and affordability. Reminds me of the type of focus the Conservatives have had, not without some controversies in other areas, but the level of focus that we even saw this week, let's say in the House of Commons on the issue of affordability. It seems like that's working.
It is absolutely working, and I found it very interesting that this week we saw all of the parties, I think, refocus on that issue compared to the first few weeks in the House of Commons where there was kind of chaos everywhere.
They were all thrown off by the events.
Shocking news, and I think it sort of disrupted everybody's game, and I think for the opposition side there was a bit of sort of gleefulness at attacking the government, and they forgot about that focus that helped the Conservatives get that lead that they got. I think we're seeing that refocus now. They're going into a break week where I imagine they're going across the country to again talk about affordability. And I think for the Liberals, one of the challenges they have, for example, on the East Coast, is that for the first time, the carbon tax is really deeply hurting them out there. It is something that local politicians on the East Coast are hearing over and over and over again. And the context with affordability, with the housing crisis, has just changed so dramatically from when the Liberals swept the region in 2015 to help them get that majority. And so that's just one example of the challenge the government faces in threading this needle of justifying past policies while trying to show that they are trying to address affordability. And it is simply easier for the opposition to attack right now than for the government to really make those changes quickly enough.
I think I've just got under a minute, Anne, but I have to ask you where the NDP fits into this. Is this, if the Conservatives are doing better, is that to the detriment or the advantage of the NDP?
Well, at the moment, the NDP seems to be at least holding its own, coming up a little bit. And I think that in some of the regional breakdowns that I was looking at today, a lot will depend on candidates. Some will depend on the boundary changes. I mean, I think that's going to be more significant than people might think. It's going to add more seats to the House of Commons, but it's also going to, it has an impact not just on where those seats are, but other seats as well. So I think that there's a lot of that still at play. I think any political party that isn't laser focused on the issues that Canadians care about the most, that being affordability and health care, is going to not do very well. And I think they'll all focus on it, and then Canadians will get to see what they're actually saying about it. Are the Conservatives, when they're talking about this, actually providing any solutions that will help people?
Okay, laser-like focus. I'll probably say it 500 more times. Thanks so much to our front bench, Elliot Hughes, Denise Cieli, Anne McGrath, and Marika Walsh. Just before